worth seeing. John dies at the end. Oh, is it good? I haven't. Okay.
All right, we are live. How's it going, Matt?
It's going well, Scott. I'm excited to talk about this fun book.
Yeah, we're gonna give people a few more minutes to roll in here, and then we'll get started.
All right. Yeah, when y'all come into the chat, go ahead and introduce yourselves if you
Yes,
wish.
say hey. Currently, it is just me. Oh no, that's my email. We can't have that up. Fortunately, nobody else is here. It's
Yeah.
not like it'll be up there forever.
Yeah.
Let's see if there's anything bad. Oh, I don't think there's anything bad on here. Man, I'm excited about this one.
Yeah.
It's gonna be a little different, I think. It's a different kind of book.
Yeah. I like that. I like that it seems like we've sampled quite a lot of different
We
literary
have.
genre is the wrong word. It's more than genre. It's like style.
Yeah. Let me see this. All right, where is? Okay, that's cool. Hey Sergey, how's it going? Good to see you again. Well, see you is relative. All right, Matt. I feel. Was it 9:30? It's almost 9:35.
Yes.
That feels like a sufficient amount of time.
I think so. And people come in late, they'll just join in where they come.
Just
If
do
that makes sense.
the old catch up.
Yep.
All right, so let's do this thing.
Okay.
Let's do the damn thing. All right, I'm hitting record. By the way,
Oh yeah.
we do need your audio, Matt.
Yeah. Well, yeah. All right. Recording.
All right, let's go in 5, 4, 3, 2,
One.
1. Hello and welcome to the Doof Book Club, our monthly live stream discussion of a book chosen by you, our listeners. My name is Scott Daly, and I die at the end of this podcast.
And I'm the evil monster clone of Matt Freeman. We are here this month to talk about the horror comedy novel John Dies at the End by David Wong.
If you are joining us here for the first time, cool. Here's a quick primer on how these things work. Each month, Matt and I select 5 books from a pool submitted by our wonderful Doof community. We put up a poll for all of our supporters on Patreon, and then we let them vote on what they'd like us to talk about. The book with the most votes wins, and then we read it.
That's right. We meet up on the last Friday of each month, and we chat about the book. We pull slides of important or interesting moments, and then we dive deep into the book for a couple of hours. For those of you in the chat right now, feel free to make comments and ask questions as we go. We want this thing to be an interactive discussion. So, Scott, why don't you tell us about this month's book?
All right, as Matt mentioned before, this month you guys finally voted in David Wong's John Dies at the End. I think this book has been on our poll like 7 times, and it was like always the runner-up. And our policy is if we bring the runner-up back for the next month, and I think that happened for like 6 months in a row, and then finally it won the poll. So this book, here's the Goodreads summary, which I think is a pretty good tonal indicator of what the book is like. So from Goodreads, and I think this is on the back of the cover too. Stop. You should have not touched this flyer with your bare hands. No, don't put it down. It's too late. They're watching you. My name is David Wong. My best friend is John. Those names are fake. You might want to change yours. You may not want to know about the things you'll read in these pages, about the sauce, about Korrok, about the invasion and the future, but it's too late. You touched the book. You're in the game. You're under the eye. The only defense is knowledge. You need to read this book to the end, even the part with the bratwurst. Why? You'll just have to trust me. The important thing is this: the drug is called soy sauce, and no one gives users a window and it gives users a window into another dimension. John and I never really had the chance to say no. You still do. I'm sorry to have involved you in this. I really am. But as you read these terrible events and the very dark epoch the world is about to enter as a result, it is crucial you keep one thing in mind. None of this was my fault.
Yes, delightful. And perfectly in the tone and voice of the character, which is the best part.
Yeah.
Yeah, so this story was originally published online as a web serial starting in 2001 before it was compiled into a manuscript and released as a trade paperback in 2008. The book was later optioned into a film written and directed by Don Coscarelli, the cult film director best known for the Phantasm film series.
Yeah, so I think this is kind of near and dear to our heart here at Doof Media, as we like talking about web serials. Um, so Matt, I had never read this book before. Had you read this book before this book club? And what did you think of it overall?
No, I definitely not read it. I had heard it mentioned in a positive light a number of times, and I thought this was an extremely fun book. I got it on audiobook, as I always do, pretty much every single time for this entire book club, and I think I blew through it in like 2 or 3 days at like the start of the month because I started listening to it at the start of the month, and then I just couldn't stop. So I had a lot of fun listening to it. And um, part of me, when I finished it, thought like, oh, well, that was kind of light fare, not very deep. But I found that having the opportunity to think about it over the course of the month, I actually found that it wasn't as shallow as maybe I interpreted it as being the first time through. What did you think?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely will not list this as one of my favorite books of all time, for sure. It is very campy. I mean, it is this horror comedy mix. It's kind of feels part Evil Dead. I think Phantasm is a film. The director of Phantasm made the movie based off of this book, and I think that is very, 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 on brand for that
Hmm.
type of. It's funny. It's weird. It's part Lovecraftian. It is not the deepest book in the world. I think, yes, you and I spent some time with this book, and we spent some time digging into this book, and we're going to find things that we think the book is doing and saying that make it seem, smarter than it appears on the surface. Um, but it's more like I think stories have different goals, right? And um, I think this book's goal, the main goal, is to just be entertaining, and I think it succeeds at that. Like I said, it's not. It's a very interesting book for the book club because I mean, last month we had a Salman Rushdie book, which is very, very deep. We talked about that thing for 2 hours, and I felt like we could talk about it for more. This is not that kind of book, for sure.
Yeah, I had the sense. In fact, it's funny because I didn't know this was a web serial or this had been a web serial until after I finished it. And then at that point, I was thinking, I get the sense that this was something that the author started maybe not entirely on a lark, but not fully seriously as literature. And then maybe it became more popular. Maybe they became more serious about it as it went. And then they presumably edited it to turn it into a manuscript to be published. And at that point, they integrated it into something a bit more cohesive and maybe a tad more serious. And I think I may be wrong about one or more of those assumptions, but I think that like you said, it seems like the driving thrust of why this was being written was somebody sitting down and saying, "I want to entertain people. How am
Yeah,
I going to entertain them today with this thing that I'm going to write today?"
yeah. I mean, there is definitely. I think you can tell it's a web serial, even in this edited copy. There's a shagginess to it.
Hmm.
It doesn't have like focus. Like I think you look at the beginning, you can tell it's a book that had an idea of what story it was, kind of story it was going to be. But it kind of loses focus and wanders a little bit in there. So you can tell that this was something that was kind of pieced together and not necessarily a plan from beginning to end as exactly what the story was going to be. But
Hmm.
you know, that's not a big deal either. Sometimes stories are episodic, and this kind of has episodes to it, right? Um,
Yeah,
yeah,
right. I mean, you and I really like live play Dungeons and Dragons podcasts, which clearly are not plotted out in exquisite detail throughout their entire run because they're literally ad libs mostly. So like there is a place for this kind of entertainment, and I think our purpose here today is to talk about why this does work.
yeah. I think you're absolutely right. And Sergey in chat says that the reason why he didn't like the book is because he thinks it fails at all of its aspirations. It fails to be funny, scary, visceral, and insightful. I don't know if it was trying to be insightful. Um, yeah, I mean, the thing about comedy is it's very subjective, right? Like, this is part of my sense of humor. This is dumb, immature, young person type of humor. That is exactly what it is. It's poop is funny humor. It's wieners are funny humor. It has some unfortunate like homophobic elements to it that are very dated for a book that started in 2001. It kind of makes sense. It uses the word retard, which is a word I do not like, and it's a word that we've generally decided is not something that should be used casually as an insult or in conversation anymore. But again, I think that's more of a product of when it was written. A lot has changed in the past, 15 to 20 years. So I don't think if the book was written today, it would have done quite that. But maybe it would have, because I think this book is very very point of view focused, right? This is our point of view character is a guy who is an angry dude who kind of hates everyone and is immature and not dumb, but like,
Kind of deluded.
yeah,
He
exactly.
has his one friend, and he's very self-justifying. I mean, it is actually an interesting point of view because he's a liar. Um, he's wrong about a lot of things
Yeah,
throughout the whole story, and constantly tries to make himself look better in the narration because he's telling a story basically.
yeah,
Yeah. Anyway, we'll get into all these details, I think, when we go
yeah.
through the
Let's.
slides.
I think let's do it. Let's do it. Let's
Yeah.
jump. Let's jump on in, and we'll start at the very beginning, with the opening lines of the story.
Okay.
Solving the following riddle will reveal an awful secret behind the universe, assuming you do not go utterly mad in the attempt. If you already happen to know the awful secret behind the universe, feel free to skip ahead. Let's just say you have an axe, just a cheap one from Home Depot. On one bitter winter day, you use said axe to behead a man. Don't worry, the man was already dead. Or maybe you should worry, because you're the one who shot him. On the follow through of the last swing, though, the handle of the axe snaps in a spray of splinters. You now have a broken axe. So, after a long night of looking for a place to dump the man and his head, you take a trip down into town with your axe. You go to the hardware store, explaining away the dark reddish stains on your broken handle as barbecue sauce. You walk out with a brand new handle for your axe. Your repaired axe sits undisturbed in your garage until the spring when, on one raining morning, you find in your kitchen, a creature that appears to be a foot-long slug with a bulging egg sac on its tail. Its jaws bite one of your forks in half with what seems like very little effort. You grab your trusty axe and chop the thing into several pieces. On the last blow, however, the axe strikes a metal leg of the overturned kitchen table and chips out a notch right in the middle of the blade. Of course, a chipped head means yet another trip to the hardware store. They sell you a brand new head for your axe. As soon as you get home, you meet the reanimated body of the guy you beheaded earlier. He's also got a new head, stitched on with what looks like plastic weed trimmer line. And it's wearing that unique expression of, "You're the man who killed me last winter" resentment that one so rarely encounters in everyday life. You brandish your axe. The guy takes a long look at the weapon with his squishy, rotting eyes, and in a gargly voice, he screams, "That's the same axe that beheaded me." Is he right? So, I this might be my favorite part of the story, man. This opening story here. I think this does such a wonderful job of me like establishing the type of humor that the story is going to be, establishing the otherworldly kind of paranormal, like zombie-ish nature of it.
Hmm.
And then it's also doing some other things, Matt, because here we have at the beginning of our story, we have our protagonist, David, thinking about this story himself. And we learn much, 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 much later in the story that David Wong, or the David Wong that is telling the story, is not the original David Wong. He is a copy a clone of David Wong. So here he's got this hilarious story that comes off as very funny, but it's questioning things are like, if it's a thing that looks exactly like the thing and it's made up of things that are copies of the old thing, is it still the thing? And that's a very fitting thing for our protagonist to be thinking about.
Yeah, I think I even forgot that the story started out this way. But this is a great beginning. I like to focus on the voice, basically the narrative voice that he's using, and
Yeah.
how this is, like you said, this is spot on. I mean, I find it to be a very charming kind of, in the way that it rambles entertainingly. Like this, I mean, basically he's relating it like a super ancient parable, right? But
Right.
he does it in his like intentionally rambly, discursive, like way too much detail, and just kind of weird and off kilter way.
Yeah,
And
I
you kind of, yeah,
actually cut a paragraph out of this because it was too long.
yeah,
Where he describes the man, which
hmm
is totally unnecessary. But it's yeah,
right,
it's I think a lot of this is tone setting. Like the book is teaching you what kind of story it's going to be,
yeah,
in more ways than one.
uh,
And I don't know,
yeah,
I just like I feel like I read this first page and I knew exactly what type of book I was gonna get, and I was on board for it. And I wonder if that could be like a litmus test. If Sergey, I'm wondering what your thought of this story in general is. Like, if you did not like the story, so did you not like could you tell that you were not going to like the story from this very first page?
yeah. That's very interesting, and I'll add, actually. I think there hasn't been one of these books that's gone by where I haven't had some comment along the lines of like, well, the audiobook experience was unique because, and in this case, like the guy who does the reading, it's not that he's doing like accents or anything. It's just like he has a lot of energy. So he's reading this. He's like, solving the following riddle will reveal the awful secret behind the universe. You know, like I'm not even doing that great a job, but like just the way he's reading it is like likable already. Like his the energy and kind of enthusiasm he's putting into it is likable. And I can imagine, like, if you're just reading this in your head and for whatever reason you don't like strike that mood, it's not going to work for you. Or maybe yeah, like if you don't like this kind of story, then your brain's not going to read this in an enthusiastic voice in your brain.
That's a
um
good point, and I wonder, like, that's one of those things that feels like to me, how much is the author's responsibility to get you at a point where you're reading it in the type of voice where if I listen to the audiobook after reading it, that would match up with my expectation of the tone.
mhm.
I mean, I think the story does a good job of establishing that. Like I said, this first page, I got the tone and I got the level of energy and kind of lighthearted fun that the book was going to bring to me.
Yeah. Yeah,
But
I mean, the whole book is pretty much dead on the same tone. So if it doesn't work for you at the beginning, it's not going to work for you later, like you said.
yeah, yeah. And I mean, we're going to talk about, like, the thing about comedy horror to me. I think comedy horror is, I don't think it's really supposed to be that scary. Like,
hmm
which is a weird thing to say because it has the word horror in it. But I think of all my favorite, like, I don't think Evil Dead. I think Evil Dead is disturbing and weird. There's not times in Evil Dead where I'm like, oh my god, I'm terrified.
hmm
But it's just kind of like, ugh. And I think that's the kind of horror that's in this book. It's disturbing things that you wouldn't normally expect to see. But
Yeah.
we'll get into that as we go as well.
Yeah. Let's go on ahead to this next slide.
Sure.
So in the prologue of the story, Dave is called by his friend John to assist with something weird going on at a girl Shelley's place. In this slide, we meet John. Shelley was in the passenger seat, hugging herself, looking blankly out the windshield. She said, "So, do you guys, like, do this a lot?" "Off and on," said John. "Been doing it for a few years." "How does somebody get into this?" "There was an incident," he said. "A series of incidents, I guess. A dead guy, another dead guy, some drugs. It's kind of a long story. Now we can see things. Sometimes. I have a dead cat that follows me around, wondering why I never feed it. Oh, and I had one hamburger that started mooing when I ate it." He glanced at me. "You remember that?" I grunted, said nothing. "It wasn't mooing, John. It was screaming." Shelley didn't look like she was listening anymore. "I call it Dante's syndrome," John said. I had never heard him call it any such thing. Meaning, I think Dave and I gained the ability to peer into hell. Only it turns out hell is right here. It's all through us and around us and in us, like the microbes that swarm through your lungs and guts and veins. Hey, look, an owl. We all looked. It was an owl, all right. See,
I,
that just makes me laugh. I can't help it.
it's like so the reason I pulled this is because this is kind of our first introduction to who John is as a person, right? There was a phone call with him before, but this is a really like John is this weird guy that gets Dave in all this trouble, or for at least from Dave's perspective, he gets him all this trouble. I think the getting into trouble is a lot more balanced than Dave kind of holds it out to be.
Yeah.
But we also establish him as a person that lies. Like I call it Dante syndrome. Like that's something that he's probably never called it before. And he's just this guy that just kind of like Dave is this like super serious, like almost melodramatic type of person, whereas John is just like this guy, or at least from Dave's perspective, that is just kind of just rolling through. Like he's just like there's all this weird shit happening around him, and they're going to investigate a haunting at this girl's house, and he sees an owl, and in the middle of a story about the fact that hell is all around us, oh look, an owl.
Yeah. Yeah, he takes everything very lightly.
Right.
He's just this like free spirit, lighthearted fella. Like that's what's so charming about John, I think, is he really is just like a lighthearted, lovable guy, which is like a really strange character archetype to have in this story, but it works perfectly, I think, especially because it's comedy.
Yeah. And as much as Dave likes him as a friend or considers him his only friend, and indeed he kind of is, Dave is really resentful of John. Dave is resentful of the lighthearted nature of John, of his seeming, lackadaisical way he approaches all the things that happen to him in life. There's a jealousy there, I think, because Dave has gone through some stuff, and we'll learn all about that later in the book. But I was really struck, especially on my second pass through, is just how many times in the book Dave describes his only friend as like a jerk, and it's like he's just so mean to him in his descriptions of him.
And he's like jealous of him too. See, I read, and this is interesting because I read a lot of that as like just the kind of good-hearted shit talking that you'll engage in amongst friends. Not necessarily that he held a deep-seated envious grudge on John. I don't know, do you disagree with that?
Not entirely. I mean, I think there is definitely some of that, and I think a lot of the reason why the book works on me is because of that, the strength of their friendship.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, I think there is some stuff there, and I think I pulled out some slides where he gets particularly like nasty to him and to people around him. I think he's also very jealous of the friends that John has, and I think one of the other things that we'll notice as we go through it is all of the other people in the story are people that are related through John and through John's relationships. Almost none of them are friends of Dave,
Yeah, you can almost imagine this story having been conceived as John's story, and then the author realizing like this character is too like lacking in flaws to actually be a protagonist. So let's have John be his best friend and foil to the actual protagonist who wants to be everything that John is, but is absolutely not.
Yeah, I mean, I think, yeah, like the title John dies at the end is kind of a tongue-in-cheek thing because, spoilers, he doesn't. And I think that title leads you to believe the book is about John, and the book is not about John at all. John, I mean, he's in it a lot, but he is so often not the driving force of any of the conflict or any of the resolution. He's definitely active. He's doing stuff, but the book is so uninterested in John's choices.
Mm-hmm.
It's all focused on our protagonists.
Yeah. Yeah.
Kyrgyzstan in chat says that they didn't get a good-hearted read from how Dave talked about John, so they kind of agree that it was much more barbed than just friendly ribbing.
Yeah, I'm wondering how much of, once again, the audiobook reader just saying it in like a cheerful voice and not like in a snide, resentful voice, like impacted my experience.
Yeah, that's interesting. I wonder what the responsibilities there are, because, I mean, presumably an audiobook, you have a director still that's directing your tone.
Mm-hmm.
and what level of involvement the creator of the work has in that. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't
That's
know.
interesting.
Yeah.
All right, so this next slide is we are now at Shelley's place, and it turns out Shelley is a demon snake monster thing.
Hmm.
A lot of the stuff in this doesn't make sense, and even by the end of it will still not make sense. It's just kind of like, yeah, it's weird stuff.
Hmm.
But it is a scary meat monster that's out for them. The man-shape arrangement of meat rose up, as if functioning as one body. It pushed itself up on two arms made of game hens and country bacon, planting two hands with sausage link fingers on the floor. The phrase "sodomized by a bratwurst poltergeist" suddenly flew through my mind. Finally, it stood fully upright, looking like the mascot for a butcher shop whose profits were entirely to support the owner's acid habit. John, we got something here. It was about 7 feet tall, its turkey head swiveling side to side to survey the room. The tongue swayed uselessly below. It extended a sausage to me. You. It was an accusation. Had we dealt with this thing before? I didn't remember, but I was bad with faces. You have tormented me 6 times. Now prepare to meet your doom. I have no way of knowing that it actually said meat instead of meat, but I'll give it the benefit of the doubt. I ran. I love that.
Yes. Once again, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, everyone. I find this to be delightful. I mean, it reminds me of like stupid, funny things that I enjoyed when I was a kid. But yeah, it's just it's charming. Sorry.
It's interesting. It's interesting to me, and this is to me. This is why I pulled this part in particular, because I think the joke that finishes the slide works on me and is hilarious. I loved that.
Hmm.
There are jokes in the slide that do not work on me. I don't think "sodomized by a bratwurst poltergeist" really lands for me.
Yeah.
Maybe it's just because I'm not 20 anymore. Maybe if I was 20, I would find that hilarious. And also this, I think sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes I think the book is trying too hard to be funny and reaches for jokes that just aren't very good. Like looking like a mascot for a butcher shop whose profits went entirely to support the owner's acid habit. I don't think that last part of the sentence is necessary. I think that's going for a joke that just didn't work.
I think
It's kind of like it feels like it's reaching to me, you know?
yeah. I mean, I think I can't argue with you, but I think the fact that he's just like doesn't stop punching with the jokes means like if that didn't work for you, guess what? We have the comical image of a meat monster with the turkey head in literally 2 sentences from now. So
Yeah.
so like I actually agree that like the misfire rate of the quote unquote jokes or just like attempts at humor was high. But it didn't really detract from like it would have been funnier if every joke was funny, but like I still thought it was fun. Yeah, I mean it's really interesting to kind of dig into like the idea of how humor works because I can
Right.
absolutely see like, hey, if half the jokes in a thing don't work, does the thing work? And it's like, well, maybe for me it does, maybe for you it doesn't, and that's fine, you know. So yeah.
I think the other thing it shows is this is a weird ass thing right here,
Hmm.
and our narrator is so kind of blasé about it that
Hmm.
it's so just a regular occurrence that he's making like he's just going for joke after joke after joke because he just doesn't take any of it seriously. And a lot of the story, I think, a lot of when you get down to the root of the story, our narrator intentionally does not take things seriously because he's terrified. He's actually terrified of existence, of life, of evil, and what evil is. And I think I think that's so interesting to me in a book about sodomy, poltergeist, bratwurst sodomy, that we get as like jokes and inappropriate humor as kind of a smokescreen.
But yeah, I think this we're gonna find out. It takes a really long time to find out, but this guy is traumatized and extremely jaded
Yeah.
and harboring a huge amount of anger at the world. And read in that light, all of this is a coping mechanism, basically.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
All right. Next slide.
Next slide. So here we have David is waiting at a restaurant in the first chapter for someone, and it turns out it's this guy Arnie Blonstone. I did open my eyes and jerked in shock. A man was sitting across from me in the booth. I hadn't heard or felt or smelled him when he slid into the seat. Was this the reporter I spoke to on the phone? Or a ninja? Hey, I mumbled. Are you Arnie? Yeah. Did you doze off there? He shook my hand. No, I was just trying to rub something off the back of my eyelid. I'm David Wong. Good to meet you. Sorry I'm late. Arnie Blonstone looked just like I imagined him. He was older, uneven haircut, and a bad mustache, a wide face made for a cigar. He wore a gray suit that looked older than I was, a tie with a fat Windsor knot. He had told me he was a reporter for a national magazine and wanted to do a feature on me and my friend John. It wasn't the first request like this, but it was the first one I had agreed to. I looked the guy up on the web, found out that he did quirky little human interest bits, Charles Kuralt stuff. One article about a guy who obsessively collects old light bulbs and paints landscapes on them. Another about a lady with 600 cats, that sort of thing. It's what polite people have instead of freak shows, I guess. Stories we can laugh at around the coffee machines in the office break room. Arnie's gaze stayed on my face a little too long, taking in my beads of cold sweat, my pale skin, the thatch of overgrown hair. Instead of pointing out any of that, Arnie said, "You don't look Asian, Mr. Wong." "I'm not. I was born in undisclosed. I had the name changed. Thought it would make me harder to find."
So this is Arnie, and this is our framing device for the story, right? This book is actually a story within a story. So the majority of this book is our protagonist relaying this information to this reporter, and I think we'll see here one of the things, like, Dave is a liar. He is an admitted liar, and the book does not hide his how much he's a liar. Like, even here, his first interaction with this guy is, Wong's not really my real name. I changed it.
Yeah.
But there's also, like, I love going back and reading it because there's this part where Dave says, "I looked this guy up on the web, found out that he did quirky little human interest bits, Charles Kuralt stuff." So that's a lie, because at the end of the book, he specifically said that it was Amy's idea to meet this guy, and it was John that printed out the articles for him to read. And he says he just really scanned them because he didn't look at them close enough to see the picture of the author that was on it to notice he's a black man, because this is Arnie Blonstone is dead. This is Arnie Blonstone's ghost. So he's looks just like I imagined him, because Dave literally imagined him into existence.
Right. Which is why he doesn't make any sound or impact when he sits down.
Right. Yeah, I mean, so all this kind of stuff is kind of like cleverly hidden right in front of our face. But it's just, I wanted to bring this up because I think the framing mechanism of the novel allows you to really explore that idea of unreliable narrator in a way that Wong makes very obvious to the reader. They explicitly say it over and over again. They beat that into your head. I'm lying. I'm making stuff up. I think in this first interaction, he tells a story, and the reporter says, "Is any of that true?" And he goes, "No, but that's a pretty good story. You should write that one down." Like, we have to take everything we're reading in here with a certain grain of salt. And I don't think that means that the events of this thing didn't happen, but we have to understand that our narrator, a very troubled person, is framing the events in a way to show, like, how he feels about himself, how he feels about the world, and how he feels about others.
Yeah, absolutely. You're always thinking about the fact that this is something that David Wong is choosing to relate to this reporter, and he'll even, he'll give you sort of a narrative aside where he's like, "I wasn't going to tell him about that," or something along those lines. And then you realize there's more going on even than what he's actually talking about.
Yeah, and I love how much, like, the story is not afraid. He gets called out on stuff before. It's like, when you talked about, like, when we get to the Vegas stuff, it's like, you said there were two carts before you. Like, you're contradicting yourself over and over again in the story. You're not, like, Amy, one of the most important characters in this book, does not appear until over halfway through it.
Yeah.
And I mean, you could argue from like a meta perspective, that's because when he originally wrote this stuff, he didn't know about that character and didn't decide that they were going to be a character until the end of the book.
But yeah, I mean, on that note, like, speaking of Amy, I'm not gonna, basically he's so hilariously unobservant that he misses, like, super obvious character details about Amy until it's, like, literally spelled out in front of his face. And I think that's very interesting. It's very interesting to have a narrator who's portrayed as being this like dense, you know?
Yeah, well, he doesn't pay attention to people.
Yeah.
Like he says earlier in that last slide, he's like, I don't know faces. He's terrible at names. He calls Amy Cucumber for half the book because he can't remember her name. The cop he eventually runs across, he calls Morgan Freeman because they kind of look like Morgan Freeman. Like he's completely like detached from the world to a point where he doesn't know or doesn't take the time to know or
Yeah.
notice anything.
Right. I think the cop specifically doesn't even look like Morgan Freeman. He's just
No,
black, and
he's
that's
literally
how
just
lazy
black.
he is.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And that's, I mean, it's definitely not supposed to make him look good that he does that too.
No, no. And I think that's what's so funny to me is because you think with an unreliable narrator, he would be constructing a story to make himself look the best as possible. But I think what we learn about David is he actually really, really hates himself. So
Hmm.
he's going to construct a narrative to actually make him look as bad as possible.
Yeah. Yeah. I think you're right.
All right. So this next slide, we're fully into Dave telling his story to the reporter now. He tells of a trip, like a party that he's going to, and he runs in with this strange dude with a Jamaican accent who tells him about his dreams. And then John goes off to a party, and then he's called randomly by John on the phone, saying something weird is going on. He goes to help John out and brings them to a Denny's. And this is when he's sitting there talking to John when his cell phone rings, and on his cell phone is also John talking to him twice.
Hmm.
And this is him kind of reeling with that, with the universe changing. If I'd been sitting with anyone else, I would have assumed I was being set up for some drunken practical joke. But I knew this wasn't some elaborate prank of John's for two reasons. One, John knows how I get when I'm pissed off and wouldn't intentionally do it. And two, it wasn't funny. I was scared, truly scared, maybe for the first time since I was a little kid. John looked pale and half dead. My feet were wet and cold. My contact lenses were itching, my brain aching from sleep deprivation. I wanted to burn that cell phone, go home and lock my doors, and curl up under a blanket in the closet. This is the breaking point in human life, right here. But my whole life had been leading up to this, hadn't it? From day one, it was like society was this violent, complicated dance, and everyone had taken lessons but me. Knocked to the floor again and again, climbing to my feet each time, bloodied and humiliated. Always met with disapproving faces, waiting for me to leave so I'd stop fucking up the party. They wanted to push me outside where the freaks huddled in the cold. Out there with the misfits, the broken, glazed-eyed types who could only watch as the normal kids enjoy their shiny new cars and careers and marriages and vacations with the kids. The freaks spent their lives shambling around, wondering how they got left out, mumbling about conspiracy theories and Bigfoot sightings. Their encounters with the world are marked by awkward conversations and stifled laughter, hidden smirks and rolled eyes. And worst of all, pity. Sitting there on that night in April, I pictured myself getting shoved out there with them, the sounds of the doors locking behind me. Welcome to Freakdom, Dave. It'll be time to start a website soon where you'll type out everything in one huge paragraph. It was like dying. So this to me is definitely something that was written later. The feel of it, the tone of it, it feels very much like something that was inserted into the story as part of moving it into a manuscript. And I think the reason because that is because I think we're working on establishing our themes of the story. This is Dave's viewpoint of the world, a violent, complicated dance where he doesn't belong and where everyone wants to push him out with the rest of the freaks, with the rest of the weirdos, the misfits, the broken, glazed-eyed types. He's terrified of that. He doesn't want that. And here it is, like this moment, this phone call, this thing that is happening to him that he can't understand is that happening to him. Something he's been waiting for his entire life, he says. And I think that goes into, his fear of life, his fear of bad things that happen, and his kind of feeling that he deserves it.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is pretty good writing here, and there's not really until the last couple sentences, not much funny about it. Actually, it's rather kind of overtly actually stating the theme of and what this character is going through, and
Yeah.
we don't yet know why he's this way. We won't find that out for quite a while, actually. But and this part of the story, by the way, I probably felt more unnerved, and I felt this was kind of the most successful horror part, the part when they first discover the sauce and the effects of the sauce, because it seemed very successfully otherworldly to me.
Yeah, I think it's really cool, and pulling slides for this was so hard, Matt, because like there's a lot good here, but there's also a lot of just like this is funny, and I
Yeah.
want to pull this slide. But yeah, I mean, I think this book is divided into two parts, and it feels like two different books, kind of to me. The second book is titled Korrok, and that's definitely like we got to tell like a story here, where
Hmm.
this is just kind of like a Twilight Zone-esque exploration of a world where it's not really concerned about an overarching story yet. But then you have little beats like this, which I think are really big, like exploratory character moments.
Yeah. Yeah, I like this moment quite a lot, actually.
I do too.
All right. Let's move on to the next one.
So we jump ahead a lot here,
Yeah.
unfortunately. But
So yeah, so here we have David and John get arrested, and it turns out that everyone else who was with John when he took the sauce, which for those of you who are listening and don't care about being spoiled, is like a magical, otherworldly drug substance that gives you powers. Ev- Everyone else that was with John when he took the sauce is either missing or dead. John appears to die, and David, accidentally pricked by the soy sauce needle, escapes to the police station. He heads to the trailer where the original sauce incident went down, sent by a dead John talking to him through a bratwurst. And then he finds more soy sauce, which is alive and forces itself down his throat. And then, right as the detective is about to walk in, weird shit happens.
Morgan Freeman.
Yeah, Morgan Freeman.
By the way, writing that summary was weird because it's like, yes, all that is things that happened.
Yeah, right. And I'm just imagining how that sounds to someone who hasn't read it. Yeah, the bratwurst part with the phone bratwurst was really funny to me. Okay, so the doorknob began to turn. Morgan was coming. Hell, Morgan was here. I wanted to run, to duck, to act. Frustrating. The body is slow, so slow. And just like that, I was outside my body. Time stopped. It was so easy for me, I almost laughed. Why hadn't I caught on before? I had a full 1.78 seconds before the detective would step through the door. The only reason we would normally perceive this span as being a short amount of time is because the wet mechanism of our bodies simply can't accomplish very much in that span. But a supercomputer can do over a trillion mathematical equations in 1 second. To that machine, 1 second is a lifetime, an eternity. Speed up how much thinking you can do in 2 seconds, and 2 seconds becomes 2 minutes, or 2 hours, or 2 trillion years. 1.74 seconds until confrontation time now. My body and the body of my nemesis frozen in that moment, on opposite sides of the door. He with his hand on the knob, me on hands and knees in suspended agony. Okay, I need a plan. I took a moment to mentally step back to assess my situation. Think. You were standing on a thin, cool crust on a gigantic ball of molten rock, hurtling through frozen space at 469, 105, 469,105 miles an hour. There are a big number subatomic particles in the universe, each set into outward motion at the moment of the Big Bang. Thus, whether or not you move your right arm now, or nod your head, or choose to eat fruity pebbles or cornflakes next Thursday morning, was all decided at the moment that universe crashed into existence 17 billion years ago, because of the motion and trajectory of those particles at the first millisecond of physical existence. Thus, it is physically impossible for you to deviate. I never finished that thought.
So, first of all, it doesn't say a big number. It just lists how many subatomic particles there are in the universe, and I
Yeah,
didn't want to do that.
right. It's without scientific notation. It's just an incredibly long number, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So here's the thing about this: it's not right, and I don't mean not right. Like I don't want to get into a talk about free will and determination and all that stuff, but I think within the world of the story, this idea that you can't your choice doesn't matter is just false in the world of this book, because what he does in this moment is he stumbles his way into the factory that's manufacturing the bullets and distracts the safety guy just long enough that the one bullet that's going to shoot him in the chest is defective, and that's why he doesn't die.
Yeah.
But I think that's what like a lot of this book is like is talking about his choices and his decision to get involved and not.
Yeah, a lot of it is portraying his negative fatalistic worldview and contrasting it with kind of like disproofs of his point of view. I think that's great.
Yeah, yeah, and I really I pulled this for you mostly because I thought you would appreciate this because with your whole free will is a lie thing.
Yeah, yeah. Well, when you have time travel involved, who knows what's, well,
Right.
it's all up in the air, right?
Yeah.
Um,
All right. So
cool.
now we get our first introduction of Amy. Well, not really because he can't remember her name, but this is one of those paragraphs that really jumped out to me when I was going back and reading afterwards. Um, I think this is really important because what happens here is Dave, after his confrontation with the police detective, is kidnapped by Justin, who is actually just some weird bug thingies he's been taken over by.
Yeah.
He's thrown into the back of a truck with all the missing soy saucers, including John, who isn't dead, who's just comatose until Molly the dog touches him, because that's where his soul was, which is something they never really bother to explain, but it doesn't matter. Um, Justin is taking them with him to Las Vegas to open a portal to hell, or what we'll actually learn where it is later. But and one of the group, Jim, he fears like he's going to die, and so he tells the story of his little sister Amy, and asks the guys to look after her, and that's what this slide is. You guys know my sister, who's back home at this moment in that big old house? Well, we've had a mouse problem, and we work hard to keep the place up, to keep it clean since our parents passed away. But you can't keep the mice away. They get everywhere. The cabinets, the walls. I got poison set out all over the place for these things. Fred pulled out a cigarette lighter, flicked it once to make sure it worked. Jim stared at the floor and continued. Then, one day, I look under her bed, and she's got a little saucer there with bread on it. The bread's all chewed off at the corners. She's put it there on purpose. The truck turned again. We heard the crackle of gravel under the tires now. Jim looked up at us again, a kind of pleading in his eyes. Do you understand? She was feeding them. The whole time I was trying to kill them, she was trying to keep them alive. I pictured her back there, small and alone in this cavernous house, and I did understand. Jim fucking knew something was coming, on its way to this world, through Las Vegas for whatever fucking reason. He knew what was at stake, while the whole world, vulnerable and unaware, went about its business as usual. I just wish he would use his sister's damn name so I wouldn't have to keep thinking of her as Cucumber. John, Fred, you guys, if one of you makes it out of this instead of me, I want you to promise me something. I want you to look in on her and make sure she's taken care of, okay? She's smart, I don't mean it just ain't never been on her own. I just want you to promise me. The truck turned again, slowing. John said, Of course, man. I thought of John's last pet, a little terrier that jumped out of his third-floor apartment window and died while he played video games on the couch. Yeah, Cucumber will be in good hands, Big Jim. So, this is the narrator being a dick to me. But so I think there's a lot going on here. It's a very long slide, and
Yeah.
sorry for taking so long to read it.
Well, I'm glad you pulled this out. It does have a lot going on.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot here. The type of person Amy is, we're kind of defining here, right? Like, Jim is trying to kill the things in the wall, kill the monsters. She's trying to feed them. And that both has a negative connotation in that he's worried that once he's gone, no one will be there to protect her because she's not interested in killing the things. But I think that kind of turns itself around when, by the end of the book, we have Dave realizing that he is the monster. He is the real Dave is dead. He is a clone. And of course, the way he sees himself as a monster anyway, he sees himself as a bad person. He sees the world. He hates himself. But she keeps the mice alive. She feeds the mice, and she is a person who will stay with him.
Yeah,
right?
she's something good about the world that's worth protecting and caring
Right.
about, which he doesn't seem to have in his life at all, basically.
Yeah.
I also like here, and this you would have had to cut a lot more text here to talk about all of it entirely, but he calls her Cucumber because it's a mean, cruel bullying name that he made up for her himself,
Right.
and propagated around the school when he was a kid, and he has this completely incorrect take on her and who she is, and like he thinks that she was in the special needs class because she's mentally handicapped and she has this problem where she vomits all the time inexplicably, and he just kind of finds her weird and disturbing. And And then we find out later, like, first of all, she's missing a hand, and she was missing it the whole time,
Yeah.
and he never noticed.
Yeah.
He never
Never.
not he never noticed. Um, and um, and also that like the reason she was vomiting all the time was because of the medication she was taking for, I think the pain or the surgery. Yeah, the pain from her
Yeah,
hand.
she was in a car accident, right? And the car,
Right.
that's what it fell on her hand. That's why she lost it. And
Right.
yeah, it was slowly dying. Like there's this horrible, horrible story about this person, and he's never bothered. And that's why, like in this, I think you can even see how detached he is from this group. Look at this. Jim is looking around at his friends, and he's begging them, "I think I'm gonna die here." And he's right. He does. Take care of her. And who does he go to? John, Fred, you guys. He doesn't mention Dave. Doesn't
Yeah.
mention Dave at all. And
Yeah.
and Dave's response to this guy pleading with his friends, like, I'm worried I'm gonna die, and I'm worried about my sister. Please, one of you take care of her. And his response, Dave's response, is to get a dig at John.
Hmm.
It's like, yeah, oh, like this guy who's so observant that he let his dog die. It's like, yeah, she'll be in good hands. What is she gonna be in better hands with you, Dave? That you who can't even remember her name? I don't know her arms missing. Like this is where I think it feels a little more nasty to me. It feels like maybe he's upset that he wasn't included in that list of people that he wasn't talked to directly. Maybe he's just mad because this person has someone who cares about her.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and he knows. I mean, and this is context we haven't really talked about, but people are kind of like scared of Dave, and they think of him as like a violent weirdo.
Yeah.
So maybe you wouldn't ask Dave to check in on your sister. But yeah, no, I agree with you. This does feel pretty barbed, and like the thing is, I like how you read John's quote there. Like, of course, man, because like that's who John is. He
Yeah.
would just be like, of course, like of course I will, you know,
Yeah.
and because he's just like this big-hearted, like down for whatever guy, and
And
Dave
that's
hates that basically.
yeah, and that's the thing. Like, I think it's so fascinating to look at John as he is depicted by Dave, and then like getting through that depiction to see his actual actions, right?
Hmm.
Because like he actually does take care of Amy. We later in the story they are brought to help on this Amy case, and like John is like really really worried about it and like committed to helping out, and he needs Dave's help. And Dave is like completely uninterested. I think we actually pulled that slide. Dave is like completely uninterested in helping out with that.
Hmm.
But like I I, I think John is such a different person that he's depicted through a lot of this. And yes, he says stupid things and he's jokey and ridiculous and sarcastic, but I don't think any of it comes from a place of like actual like meanness on John's part, unless it's coming from Dave like trying to make him look bad.
Yeah, I think you're right. I can't think of any instance where John is actually cruel.
Yeah. So Hayden in chat says that Amy didn't lose her hand until the second time through. It's something that the forces did as a show of power. That's possible. I don't remember that being explicitly declared or not. I mean, it's very possible because that they've shown that they can absolutely do something like that.
Interesting. I don't think I got that, but I did read this a month ago, which is a million years in
I
terms
read
of
it.
my
I read
brain.
it 2 days ago, so
Okay.
I should remember that. I'm not gonna. I'm not gonna. I can't say you're definitely wrong or anything.
But even if
That's
that were the case, wouldn't he still remember it in a consistent way? I don't know.
theoretically should, but the way those things work is like, remember, he's like sometimes I remember and sometimes I don't.
Yeah.
Like depending on, it's weird.
Okay. Yeah. You're right. Okay. So next slide. Dave confronts Justin, the possessed person who calls himself Shitload.
Because there are a shitload of things inside him.
I laughed so hard when they first said the name because yeah. Anyway,
Yeah,
to at least
poop is funny.
yeah, to at least feel like I was doing something, I said, "Dead World, is that where you're from?" "No, dude, that's where you're from. It's where we are now. This place, it's a horror show. If the guy next to you decides to blow you out of this world forever, he can do it with just a piece of metal, or hell, even his bare hand. You blobs, you sit here soaking in the acid of your guts. You suck the life from the innocent creatures of this world just so you can clock another day. You're machines that run on the terror and pain and mutilation of other lives. You'll scrape the world clean of every green and living thing until starvation goes 187 on every one of your sorry asses. Your desperation to put off death leading to the ultimate death of everybody and everything. Dude, I can't believe you ain't all paralyzed by the pure naked horror of this place. After a long, long pause, John said, "Ah, thank you." Um, and that's okay. So this is one of I'm really glad you pulled this out, actually, and I'm gonna take this as a jumping off point to talk about
Go for
what
it.
I think is like the most serious theme, which is that of the story, which is that like evil is banal and petty and stupid, and like what this evil like alien creature is basically saying, and we can talk about whether or not the story is saying this or whether that's just the point of view of this creature is like no, like the Lovecraftian horror that we're portraying in this story isn't necessarily um, some dead god who sleeps beneath the sea. It's just the world as it is. If you just look at it, um, what this character would say clearly, and what a normal person might say with an extremely pessimistic and nihilistic bent.
Uh-huh.
But like he's certainly right that there is an enormous amount of suffering inherent in just like living a normal human life,
Yeah.
and that's not debatable actually.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
I mean, I think we're gonna hit that beat again when we get to Korrok himself and realize just how much like shitload he is, like this petty, immature, childish. I don't want. We'll get to that slide when we get there,
yeah,
but yeah, I mean, this this depiction of the world as it is almost to me lining up with Dave's earlier speech about what he thinks the world is. And this is the bad guy. This is the guy that they're trying to let creatures come in to take over this world, and the person they're trying to stop. And he lines up with David's worldview, I think.
yeah,
And like again, we have to remember that the framing device of this is that he's telling this story, but he's telling the story of a guy who thinks this thing that I think Dave also, maybe not to the extreme level of what Shitload thinks, but he would agree that about the terror and pain and mutilation of other lives because he was terrorized and given pain and mutilated.
yeah. I think that's what catalyzes his character change is seeing his worst qualities reflected in this great evil that's encroaching, and he's like,
Yeah.
wow, is that what I look like in the mirror, and
Yeah.
it doesn't, I don't think it fixes him, but it definitely gives him a little kick in the pants.
Yeah, this great evil that I think importantly is not a great evil. It's not some like all powerful on high. It's not demons. It's not hell. It's not the great source of evil in all the world. It's just another thing on another world that just thinks that they can make things better by eating people.
And like when we do meet that, when we do get to that part, like we're gonna see that it's just stupid, like, and the story doesn't try to make it seem
Right.
um like Sauron or something. Like, no, it's an intentionally stupid opponent.
Yeah.
And that's actually saying something about, I think, what the story is saying about what evil actually is and how evil actually manifests in the actual world, because there is no actual Sauron.
Yeah.
There's just bullies and stupidity and short-sightedness.
Yep.
Cool.
All right, so this next slide, Dave and the rest of the company successfully defeat Justin and the evil monsters in Las Vegas, though a bunch of people die, including Jim. The first book ends, and book 2, Korrok, begins. The evil creatures and spirits, whatever, are fucking with Dave, who is going through a lot of shit. He's losing time, which is interesting. I want to circle back to the idea of him losing time. But his life is basically just miserable, and he wants to stay away from all this stuff, but he's finding himself being drawn into it. The pizza tasted like rotten eggs, just to me, not to John. The rest of that week, every meal smelled like formaldehyde or paint thinner. I decided it was them messing with me, punching random buttons in my brain. When they got bored with that, they switched senses. I would hear my name as I drifted off to sleep, as if spoken 6 inches from my ear, over and over again. Molly started to get agitated, growling at things in the darkness, prowling around our bed at all hours of the night, as if keeping watch. Early one morning, she woke me up, pressing her wet nose against my elbow. I went to let her outside, and she went sprinting down the street. She didn't look back. Not long after that, they, whoever they were, tried something new. The radio. I would hear entire songs, changed, twisted. I got dancey and lighthearted beats under lyrics about prison rape or incest, and once a version of Stairway to Heaven with my name edited in throughout. This new version that blared over the speakers of a busy shopping mall, though only I heard it, of course, was a list of all my chronic sins and vices, a musical rundown of the reasons I, David Wong, were destined for hell. It got to me, I admit. Even if their version of Stairway barely rhymed, what rhymes with masturbation? So, this is really interesting to me. So, I mean, this is like, literally, this is the bad things beating down on him because they want him, as we'll learn later. But it's also, once again, very focused about him. Like he says, like, the interesting thing about this to me is what we know from later in the story is the other world, Korrok, they want John, they want Dave, and they want Molly, right? They want them there. But to Dave, this is only happening to him, just to me, not to John. And I wonder if that's true. You know, like, I think we've been primed to have this unreliable narrative. Like, obviously Molly's getting screwed with too, right? Like, Molly gets so screwed with she runs away. In his mind, John is fine. And it's maybe just because John is the type of person that's not going to share this stuff with him. But I don't know. I find it very hard to believe that they're screwing with David in particular and just doing nothing to John.
Yeah, I mean, I think they might be working on John in a different way. And I also think that, like, we don't know we don't know if John has some terrible trauma in his past. And if he does, I don't think it's ever even hinted at.
No.
And so maybe they just think that they have a better shot at corrupting and breaking Dave. As for Molly, I don't even know where to begin because I'm not even entirely sure if Molly's like an actual dog or what's going on.
We don't know what Molly's Molly.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter. She's a magic dog.
She's a magic dog. I mean, that's fine. Your story can have a magic dog. It makes me not very confident in saying what might be happening with her. Yeah, I don't know. That's interesting. I don't think I considered that maybe because this it's interesting. Like this is a manifestation of how self-centered he is. This all these weird things are happening to both of them, but he's incredibly incurious about like what's going on with John. Yeah. Like he'll never. I don't know. He does take care of John. Like there's when John calls in for help at the beginning of the story, he immediately goes to help John and like drops everything he's doing. He's gonna take him to the ER and everything. But also, he's not really proactive in taking care of John, even though John is like his only friend. And there's a hint of that here, I think.
Yeah, and he's very mad at John for making him do that as well.
Yeah,
I mean, this is like the poster child for self-absorbed, right? Like this is literally, it's all about me. Like literally, the monsters are changing songs to speak directly to me. This is, you probably think the song is about you because it literally is. And I'm not saying that the monsters are not specifically doing this, but I just think it's very interesting that he's most concerned with the stuff that's happening to him.
Yeah, no, I like that.
Sergei mentions that the entire end of the Vegas story is either peak of unreliable narration or just the most inconsistent monster story I've ever read. I wonder, like, what do you mean by inconsistent? I mean, I honestly, we skipped over like the Vegas conclusion because I didn't particularly find a lot there to talk about. It's just like a big fight, and there's like it's
like the priest guy or whatever.
They meet a priest guy and they win, and there's just not a lot there.
There's the element that like at least one of them is erased from time, which leads to actual inconsistencies in the story, which are identified by the reporter.
Yeah, which I love. I love that. And I wonder if anyone reading it as it was first written picked up on those inconsistencies before they dished that.
Mm-hmm.
It'd be like a thing, like if we were doing, we've got John dies at the end, if we picked up on that or not. I don't know.
Yeah.
Because I did definitely notice one point where Jennifer Lopez calls out a name of a person that we've never met before, and I was like, huh,
Hmm.
okay, I'll just keep moving on.
Yeah, I guess that's a little opening to bring up one thing that I guess is, I guess it is a criticism that like if you asked me, like under pain of death, to explain what exactly they accomplished in Vegas, I couldn't do it. Um, like I, the nature of the creatures they were fighting and all of that, and like the fact that one of them actually seems to like not be malevolent later, unless I'm completely confusing two different things.
You talk about North.
The the wig creature who like is just fine later. Uh,
Yeah,
uh,
I like that. I mean, that's the thing about this story is I think you're like knowing what we know about Korrok and what their plan is at the end of the story. What was Vegas? Because yeah, I mean, like they were trying to open a door apparently, but it was a door that the shadow people were coming through. But then did that succeed? Like, did they come through, and that's why we see the shadow people through the rest of the story because they got through via that Vegas thing, or were they just always able to go through? And I don't think there are like definitive answers to any of these questions. And I think that's a symptom of kind of a story being real time developed as it was going, and then I think it's much harder to clean up a story like that after the fact, even if you're trying to put it together in one manuscript. I don't think when he was writing the Vegas conclusion, the Vegas climax, he had a clear idea of where the rest of the story was going to go.
and I also think like that's why I kind of hesitated before I said it was a criticism, because I'm like, this is a Lovecraftian horror story, told from the perspective of like a self-centered idiot who doesn't really understand what's going on.
Right.
So like yeah, like you don't understand what the Vegas thing was about because Dave doesn't understand what the Vegas thing was about, and that's intentional. And like maybe the
Yeah.
priest guy does. It's kind of implied that the priest guy is like this high level like debonair player of the spiritual world who could just solve all their problems if they could just get his attention, and but he doesn't give them any attention, and that's
Yeah.
it's actually
Yeah.
kind of funny, the way it's played.
Yeah.
um yeah.
Both Michael and Ben and Chad are talking about how the first time they read this book, they didn't see Dave as that unreliable of a narrator. Um,
Or that he
I
was a huge jerk.
yeah, I wonder, did either of you guys read it again since then? Because I mean, it's very possible that Matt and I just have an interpretation that's just different, and ours doesn't become the right one because we think the way it is. But
Yeah. And also, I mean, like I said, the audiobook kind of made me really like Dave. Like I really like Dave. I don't.
I don't dislike
Yeah,
Dave.
yeah. I don't dislike him, and I can relate to his anger. Like everyone has some negativity in them, you know. So I
Yeah,
because
I mean,
yeah,
I think I can say that he's a self-absorbed jerk that I happen to like a lot.
yeah,
I mean, I think that's fair.
yeah.
Um,
I thought he was a good protagonist. Yeah, I mean,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Okay. All right. I'll move on to the next slide then.
Sure.
So suddenly the book reminds itself that it needs to have a plot that like moves forward. So John and Dave are pulled in to help on some weird stuff by John's cop uncle Drake. I walked on, feeling already like this was wrong, totally wrong, my car keys clutched in my hand like a rosary, our shoes crunching dead leaves with each step. Crunch, crunch, crunch. I blinked, trying to adjust to the dark, failing, eyes watering from the chilled air, a little soreness in my knees from bouncing down the steps, a tickling around the hairs on my ankles, every nerve alive and standing at attention. I blinked and could see a little now, my Hyundai just 20 feet away, one of two cars in the lot. The low, cloud-filtered gloom made the blue compact appear a few shades too dark. I suddenly had this flash of visual memory, the glimpse of parking lot as my headlights swept across it when we pulled in, flat asphalt under circles of lamplight. That memory nodded in my gut for some reason, something I couldn't put my finger on. We walked. Crunch, crunch, crinch. Something's wrong. Seeing it again, the lights flashed across the lot as we hurried in, a newly paved lot with fresh, dark pavement against sharp yellow lines. Crunch, crunch, and completely devoid of fallen leaves. Crunch. That tickling in my ankles again. I stopped, looked down. From behind me, John screamed. The ground was rippling. Um, I
So
like this.
I pulled this out because I think the horror really works here, Matt.
Mhm.
They're surrounded by insects. There's cockroaches everywhere.
Yeah. I think I got that this was happening about like almost immediately in terms of the progression of the scene. But like that's the fun dramatic irony of it is you're waiting for the character to get it.
Yeah, yeah. I think it works really well,
Yeah.
and I don't remember whether I got it or not, but I just like I like the writing here a lot too. Like I think the reason why you got it is because it's pretty transparent that something's going wrong here. I like
Right.
how I didn't write that down wrong. I like how changes to crunch to crunch to
Yeah.
crunch. Like
Yeah.
it's like changing as it's almost as like your brain is making it sound like leaf crunches because that's what you think it is, and as your brain realizes what it actually is, the sound is
Yeah.
actually changing.
Yeah. It turns into mashing cockroach sounds.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's such a great little touch. Yeah.
Yeah.
So Sergey brings up something interesting before we move on that like the soy sauce is like a catch-all for like why did something happen? Well, because the soy sauce and the plot loses all stakes because of that. And that's interesting. I don't know if I agree. Like I think the interesting thing, and I'm trying to come up with a way of saying this in a way that makes sense. I don't I don't think the plot of this book matters. I don't think the overarching like detail of the who, what, where, when, and why of the plot of Korrok and his band matter to what the story is trying to do.
I think what does matter is the evolution of his relationships with the key people in the story,
Yes.
like John and Amy and Jennifer Lopez, actually, also, who's
Yeah.
someone we haven't mentioned very much because it's not a super deep relationship, but it definitely means a lot to his character.
Mm-hmm.
And and yeah, like uh, the plot is silly. It's silly. Like there's no two ways about it. The character interactions are not taken lightly. The cosmic horror plot definitely is taken lightly.
Yeah. The I think the logic behind the cosmic horror is not something that the book deals wants to spend a lot of time on, and I can see how that could be completely world breaking for you to the point where you just aren't invested. Because I've seen that complaint a lot. My sister read this book too, and her complaint was I didn't care about any of the characters because I didn't feel like I understood the stakes, and I think that's fair. But yeah, I just like I think maybe it's just because I watch these kind of like horror like Lovecraftian horror comedy things so much where like the details of like Evil Dead, the details of what it all like the book is just like this evil that makes evil things happen, and
Hmm.
it's going to do whatever evil it needs to do. You're kind of just along for the ride.
Yeah, and also talking about the sauce. I think before the recording, Scott and I were actually like, so what is the sauce actually? And I was like, But the thing is, like, and maybe I'm dignifying it way too much by using this terminology, but like the sauce just seems sort of like a generic catastrophic um, source of grace in this world. Like the good guys are up against a force they can't handle, they can't understand, they can't fight, they don't have the tools to fight. Something comes in and gives them it basically empowers them. It's a power that comes with a cost, but it gives them the ability to at least grapple with it. And we don't need to know more than that, really. We just need to know that there's a source of sort of like unspecified grace that that is giving them a little bit of an edge here. And I don't even know if I'm right in saying that, honestly. But
Well, it's like I think that's true, and I want to think that too, but I don't. I think the bad guys made the sauce. Like I think the sauce comes from Korok and the biomechanical engineering that goes on that world. Um, so, I mean, I think that still works as that. It's like this is their tool. I think it works as a catastrophic tool to help them to the finish line. Um, but
Yeah, I guess I think you're probably right. Actually, I think the you catastrophe, if there is one, is that it actually works out for them. Um, but yeah, I don't know.
yeah,
I don't know. I'm very uncertain about that.
yeah, I am too. And like I think that maybe the book could have done a slightly better job of clearing that up. I don't. That's not that Sergey. That's not what Deus Ex Machina means. That's no. Um. Okay. Are we ready for the next slide?
Yes.
All right. Dave has killed someone. Matt.
Hmm.
He doesn't remember who it is, but there's a bullet missing from his gun. He's lost time. Oh, and there's a body in his shed that he refuses to look at. He thinks it's Amy who has gone missing, and he thinks and who's still missing at this point, and he's kind of wrestling with the truth of Amy. In the end, the people riding in the back of that beer truck couldn't protect her. They couldn't protect her from me. There was no question in my mind that I had done it. I didn't want to do it, to be sure, but I had done it just the same. And the thought, the gargantuan thought that swallowed me the way the impossible idea of eternity will swallow me upon arrival in hell, was that nothing would ever, ever be right again. Christ, the weight of it. No shit, asshole. That's why you have to act. She's dead. You're not. Think. Do you know what they do to guys like you in jail? The river isn't frozen over yet. Just take the body and dump it. Cut off the head at the hands and dump it. This isn't your fault. No, I wouldn't do that. I had a vision of friends and family, and she has to have family somewhere, living the rest of their lives not knowing what happened to Amy Sullivan. No, they deserve to know. They deserve to know that I did it and to see me strapped to a table with a needle in my arm. I made myself breathe. One step at a time. That was the only way to handle things after they spun out of control. Step 1, breathe. Step 2, stand up. Go inside the shed, take a look, make sure it's her. Oh, hey, that's right. You might have a whole collection of corpses stacked around here. Then go to Amy's place and tell John. Just tell him. No bullshit. Then call Drake and show him the body. Tell him the truth. Tell him I blanked out, and there she was. Let's face it, if I'm this dangerous, it's better that I be locked up for everyone's safety. I climbed to my feet, put my hand on the door. Okay, fine. Just go in and unwrap her and face this thing. Just face what you did. And closed it. I snapped the padlock shut and then trudged inside the house. So this is really interesting because I think this is where we're starting to get the point of Dave's growth and change, right? He thinks he's done something bad and he's willing to pay for the consequences for it, but not yet, not quite yet, right? He's having this like internal war, like this literal internal war with himself, and his internal self reverse psychologies him.
Yeah, yeah. I really love this part because I remember not knowing what I wanted him to do here. Like he's your protagonist. You're kind of rooting for him, and he's almost arguing in a way where you're following along with the argument. And you're like, yeah, well, you have a point. But on the other hand, it wasn't actually you. It was some other evil force that obviously took over your body. So you should, and then you kind of want him to, you want him to get out of the situation,
Yeah.
and you also don't want this to actually be true. Like, a big part of you, I think, when you're reading is like, I don't think it's Amy under the tarp or whatever, because, or the blanket or whatever, because I think if it was going to be Amy, the story would have just shown you that it was Amy. In fact, I didn't guess who it was for forever. So
Yeah, I mean, I did not see that particular twist coming.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it was very satisfying when it got there.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I like my favorite part of this is that reverse psychology there at the bottom, that like this thing is egging him on to do the wrong thing, to do the wrong thing, to do the wrong thing, and then finally at the very end it says do the right thing. Fine, just go in and wrap her face and face this thing. Face what you did, and that's when he closes the padlock, because he's not like, character growth is a journey. It just doesn't happen like this. It happens over time, and I think he's like I think you could call a lot of this movie like, I don't want to say like a coming of age story, but a story of
becoming an adult.
Yeah.
Perhaps.
Yeah.
Yeah. Going from being a man child to being an adult, perhaps. Yeah.
Yeah.
I like that because, he, as we pointed out before, he has a big problem with like blaming other people for his problems, even though he's at least equally culpable.
Yeah, but I think that gets to a discussion I want to have when we get there. But is the ending of this book happy?
Hmm.
And I don't know if the answer to that is clear.
Yeah, I wish that I had reread the ending before this because I wonder if there's not even some unreliable narrator stuff happening there. But
Yeah.
yeah, let's talk about that when we get there.
All right.
Um, all right, so next slide. Turns out Amy isn't dead, and
Yay.
Dave just kind of ignores who the dead person could be for a while. Good job just leaving a dead body in your shed
Yeah.
all winter. It's freezing, so you can afford to ignore it for a while, right?
Sure.
So they're still working the Amy case, and they found some chat logs that indicate that Korrok, the big bad of the story, is doing some weird shit, and Amy is in danger. I folded the pages and ran my hand over my mouth, unshaven jaw like sandpaper. Korok, the slave master, a blue eye in the darkness, populations of worlds roil in my guts, in his guts. As much as I hate being right, I hate it even more when John is right. Marcy said, "Isn't that just the weirdest?" I glanced at Marcy, then at John. Keep in mind these two had been going out all of 10 days. John said, "Somebody's got to stay with Amy tonight." Oh, and don't even get me started on her, John. I tossed the prince aside. I mean, did you notice that she's not even retarded? Silence from John's end. Then, was she supposed to come back retarded? They had her at that school, Pineview, the alternative school where they put the retarded kids. That would be the same facility where you went to school for a year? Yes, Pineview. So,
So he's an asshole
yeah,
here. Like he's a total asshole.
he's an asshole, and like his being um just completely blind to things that are going on around him, and like he's being dismissive and denigrating her in a context where he was in exactly the same situation. Like he should
Right.
see her as a kindred spirit, and comes to later, which I think is character growth. Like that's the character growth, is he comes to realize like, oh, we're two peas in a pod actually. But he's like,
Yeah.
I'm better than her. Can you believe it?
Yeah.
She it's Yeah,
She's not even mentally handicapped. She
yeah,
was at that place and she's not she should be. Why was she there if she's not? And then
yeah,
John's like, "But you were."
yeah, right.
And like and this dig at John's got Marcy here, his new girlfriend with him, and this dig, keep in mind these two had only been going out all of 10 days. Oh, I'm sorry, he has a connection with a woman that allows him to share the things he's going through with her. Like
Right.
it's just an unnecessary dig. Like she's not even doing anything wrong, she's just reacting to the horrible shit that's happening. And John, again, he, like we talked about before, John is, somebody's got to stay with Amy tonight. Like she's in danger. We need to do something about this. And he's no, no.
Yeah.
Nah. And I think it's because he's like, I think in the midst of change, you tend to react, to push back against that. He's realizing things about himself, and his reaction is to push against it. Maybe he sees a little bit of that kindred spirit in her, and that terrifies him.
Yeah, because again, he doesn't want to be. He sees her as one of the freaks
Yeah,
out.
one of those people out in the cold.
Yep.
And if I'm like that, it means that I'm out there too.
Yeah, I'm
Yep.
one of those, and he's terrified that he is that, to the extent that he will do anything to not associate with that, even though he really identifies with it, and that's the whole problem.
Yeah. But then we get the locker room story on the next slide,
Hmm.
or at least part of it. I didn't get it all. There's a lot. There's a lot here.
Yeah.
But he's sitting down talking to Amy, and he finally tells her, "It was just like the locker room," I said. "That day at the high school, not Pineview where we went to school together, but before that, before they shipped me off there. Billy Hitchcock and 4 friends, their hands on me like animal jaws, twisting me, pushing me to the ground, so easy, so fucking easy the way they overpowered me. And that look of stupid joy on their faces, because they knew. They knew they could do whatever they wanted, and they knew that I knew. And that fear, that total hopelessness when I realized I wasn't going to kick my way out of it, and the coach wasn't going to come in and break it up, and nobody was going to come to my rescue. Whatever they wanted to do was going to happen, and happen, and happen, until they got bored with it, and they got so high off that power. I felt Smith's plastic grip digging into my palm, knew I was involuntarily squeezing it. Before that, Billy's neighbor had this little yappy dog, expensive thing. One day, this old lady comes home and finds the little yapping thing in her backyard. Only it's not yapping because Billy has taken a hot glue gun and glued its jaws shut. He decided to do the eyes too. And look, the point is, I think that people live on forever, outside of time somehow. And I think that people like Billy, they never change. And I think that they all wind up in the same place. And that you and I can wind up right among them and they have forever, literally forever, to do what they want with us. In whatever way people live, maybe you don't have a body that they can cut or bruise or burn, but the worst pain isn't in nerve endings, is it? Total fear and submission and torment and deprivation and hopelessness, that tidal wave of hopelessness. They never get tired, they never sleep, and you never, ever die. They stay on top of you and hold you down and down and down forever. So this is like, in the middle of this book about poop and doorknobs that turn into penises and crazy meat monsters, there's a boy being assaulted,
Yeah.
and it damaging him forever.
Yeah, this is really heavy. I mean, I think like this is a more compelling depiction of like hell than Dante. Like it's because it's something you can relate to.
Yeah.
It's and again, this is, I think, this is the part where when I got to it, like the theme kind of clicked for me, that it's like the theme is that the evil of a stupid middle school child who is hurting something or someone just because they can, and finding joy and power in hurting that thing. That's the kind of evil that we actually need to be worried about in our lives. Like that's the scary kind of evil. And that's what I think is really cool about this whole story, actually, is it's we've referred to it as Lovecraftian horror because that's sort of the genre that it's trying to fit into. But the Lovecraftian horror idea is it's this unknowable, weird cosmic horror that you can't, like, the horror of it is you can't understand it. It's beyond human comprehension, and it's unknown. It's just like the unknown personified almost. This is the opposite of that. This is the most mundane, worst parts of humanity elevated into something on a cosmic scale. And that is the cosmic horror. That is the source of the cosmic horror, is just joy in hurting others, which is very, unfortunately, relatable to everyone.
Yeah, and I think if Dave gets any kind of cathartic ending at the end of this, I think it's a realization that this hell that he's going to end up in isn't necessarily there,
Mm-hmm.
because all these weird things are happening to him, and it feels like demons, it feels like monsters, it feels like hell is literally escaping and coming into his world, and that terrifies him. But we learn that it is just another level of that mundane horror. You're absolutely right. Korrok is a middle schooler that just has a lot of power.
Yeah.
That's what he is. Like, and it's just more of this. It's more of this mundane horror, and that is terrifying, yes, and it's scary, but it's not this depiction of what he described here. It's not this hell forever outside of time where he will be tortured and abused for eternity. That's not what it is. That's like that. You're right. That would be Lovecraftian. That would be this horrible cosmic, unkillable, unknowable thing. But that's not what the evil in this story is. And I think if there's any kind of happy ending on this, it's that at least there's that.
Yeah. So Sergey mentions an interesting thought, which I think occurred to me a couple of times. But they mentioned this idea that, you could read the book as there's no real monsters, there's no real supernatural elements. The whole book is just a psychotic break on Dave's part due to using drugs, which ends with him killing a bunch of people and having delusions about it. That definitely occurred to me at a few points where you're like, especially parts like this where things are getting real, things are getting serious, and you're like, is this going to be one of those stories where it turns into a massive gut punch, and it's revealed that this is all a lie, actually. Like, especially when you find out, like, oh, it's all a framing story. Is this all just the lie of an extremely delusional person who's actually just a sad, um, rather pathetic, tragic figure who actually just killed some people and is deluded about it?
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't have been surprised, honestly, if that's kind of how it went. Um, I don't think that read is true. I think the text. I don't know. I think the text goes far enough in the other direction for you to say like, no, I don't think that's what's going on. But it is
Yeah,
an interesting thing.
I don't think you need the monsters to be a psychotic break for the monsters to also be a metaphor. They can be real monsters, and they can also be metaphor for Dave handling his the evil that was done against him and the evil that it made him do. Because the part that we didn't mention is his reaction to what happened to him was he pulled out a pocket knife and stabbed the guy in the face so many times he went blind and then eventually killed himself.
Yeah.
So it's like this idea of evil begetting evil, and that's kind of why he hates himself, because he had this terrible thing happen to him, and his response was to do terrible things back. And I don't think he's forgiven himself for that, even
Yeah.
though like that's a totally traumatic experience. Like I can't imagine.
Yeah. And I think that's a really interesting like take that the book has is like, yeah, he he contacted that like hate and rage and anger and will like the will to do harm to someone, but he didn't take joy in it. He doesn't take joy in it. He's not happy that he
Yeah,
did that. And that's
yeah,
why he's like a borderline case that the evil really wants to kind of win over. Like, hey,
yeah,
be on our side, take joy in it. It's
yeah,
fun. And he's like, no, it's horrible, actually.
yeah.
So,
I think you're right. Speaking of him hating himself, let's do the next slide.
all right. So the next slide, John and Dave are going into another universe to combat the evil things, and Amy wants to go with them. Um, no, you think this is cool. I can see it in your eyes. It's not cool. We do not have this thing under control. Let me tell you a story. When I was little, we had our sewer line backed up, toilet overflowing and all that. So they had to come out and root it out. And what they pulled out of that sewer line was a woodchuck. There was a break in the pipe somewhere, two joins had pulled apart, and this thing had gotten in. Okay? I mean, to a woodchuck, this had to be the adventure of a lifetime. Hidden tunnel, seeming to go on for miles. So he's crawling and exploring and waiting to see the hidden treasure at the end. And then he gets drowned in our poo. Amy nodded and said, well, that's sad. The saddest. John and I, we're the woodchuck. See, I can read it on you that you think you're really part of something now, that we're going to do something really great today and change the world. Well, Amy, understand what I'm about to say. There's something terribly wrong with us, John and me. Amy, there are days when I'm sure that I'm stone cold raving batshit insane. There's none of this happening, that I'm raving about it from a padded room somewhere. And do you know how I respond to that? To that knowledge that I may be delusional and dangerous? I arm myself with a gun. David, you're not. Listen, the only reason I'm standing up to these guys now is because I'm in a corner. I don't have a choice. You do. And if you make the wrong choice, there's an excellent chance that these are your last days on Earth. All the things you wanted to do with your life, they may not happen. All the things you like to do, all the things you thought you might like to do in the future, all gone. And it'll be because of me, because I led you into my turd pipe. Why do you like hate yourself? If I knew me as somebody else, I would hate me just as much. Why have a double standard? Well, that's just stupid.
It is stupid, Dave. It's really stupid. I liked this so much, and
Yeah.
I think the thing that I like about this is I think Dave is both right and wrong at the same time. I think Amy does on some level think she's about to go on an adventure and do important things, but hey, they also actually go do important things. Like they actually do save the world or temporarily.
Yeah. Yeah. You're right. Yeah. I mean, he's yet again, he's wrong. Yet again, David is completely wrong.
Yeah. Um, and it's so tragic to me here because he's like going on like ranting at her, and he really doesn't understand her as well. I think he thinks he does, but like the whole epilogue of the book is him trying to push her away and push her away and push her away, and it never works. Like she's there because Matt, she's the one that feeds the mice. Like
Hmm.
that's the person she is, and that's why she wants to be here, not because I don't think it's fully she just wants fun adventures.
Yeah.
She doesn't want to go down that pipe. She wants to be with the people she cares about, and at this point she cares about him. That's the response. Why do you hate yourself? The implication there is, I don't hate you. I like you. I think you're an amazing person. So why do you hate yourself? That doesn't make sense to me. That's stupid.
Yeah, right. And she's seen enough to understand that like this is important, and she doesn't want to be here because she expects it to be a fun adventure and she expects to
Yeah.
win. She wants to be here because she feels like it's necessary. And that's not why that's not why Dave is here. Dave is here because, like he said, he feels like he's been put into a corner.
Yeah.
Which I wonder if he's being honest with himself.
Yeah. I thought about that too. And I mean, he says there's something terribly wrong with us, John and me, and I wonder if John would agree with that.
Yeah, I don't know. I just I remember this distinctly because at that point I was like, I wonder what's wrong with John, like, because I don't want to just assume that John is actually as cheerful and perfect as David perceives him as, because that seems actually kind of unlikely. So, but then again, the text doesn't give us any particular evidence that John is not just a great guy. So I'm not sure where to go with that.
Yeah. And then at last we meet Korrok. They go to this other planet, and they've been waiting for them there, and it's a planet ruled by biomechanical stuff instead of machines, like a spider elevator. The detail of this world is actually really great, Matt.
Yeah.
The guys who think our clothes are so weird, to make sure you're not uncomfortable by our weird clothing styles, we just decided to be naked.
Yeah. Right. Right.
I thought that was really funny.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I actually kind of thought that was a fun, like almost science fictional touch too, because it's like, what do your clothes look like then?
Yeah, and then we'd see them later, and they're just like kind of weird bands of leather and stuff. They're probably made out of
Like
other
skin,
creatures.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Gentlemen, said the large man, you are seeing what only a select few have seen. You are looking at the ultimate manifestation of Mr. Rooney's creation, which now stands as the absolute wisdom and strength of all existence. John, David, meet Korrok. I hesitate in telling the story at this point. When I try to bring up an image of Korrok in my mind, I see only the glob of stuff that collects in the kitchen drain, the mass of grease and hair washed by years of filthy dishwater. It was like someone collected all the drain slime in the world and knitted it into something that the size of the Statue of Liberty, then brought it to life with the psychotic energy that fuels lynch mobs. There was so much to Korrok that it was impossible to see it, a jumbled mess of exposed organs and fibers and dangling club-ended limbs of dripping orifices and slimy orbs of dark black bulbs with colors that moved on the surface like rainbows in an oil slick. Every inch of it was moving. I stared and stared and stared and found my brain could not contain it all. And then, in my head, I heard a high-pitched cackling laughter of a child. Welcome, said the alien voice in my head. It sounded like a toddler. Your wiener is even smaller in person. It giggled. I thought, is this Korrok? With tiny changes in your brain chemistry, I could make you a child molester. What do you want? I asked it in my head. Not big black cocks, so we don't have that in common. So this just like you were saying, Matt, this is Korrok. This is the great unknowable cosmic horror
Right.
that's just a mess of gross-looking shit with the mind of a kid.
Yeah. Right.
That's it.
It's like if you found out Cthulhu had the mind of a child, of a particularly, bad child.
Yeah.
And I think it's great because it works as like a subversion of expectations, because even though this is a comedy, you expect Korok to be this intimidating epic thing, and it's not. But also it works as, yet again, I mean, we've already said this, essentially underlining this theme that Korok is the representation of like mundane evil, of the worst of humanity. He's not an otherworldly thing. He's a very, very much a human thing.
Yeah, Sergei says it. This is not a cosmic horror story. This is a story that you think is a cosmic horror story that probably on some level maybe Dave wanted there to be a cosmic horror story, because then at least that would make sense. it would make sense if the world is terrible because of some unknowable cosmic terrible thing, but mundanity, humanity just being the source of all this evil, that is reality.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And he's just like the kids that held him down in the locker room.
Yep. Exactly. I mean, that's yeah. I think that's my favorite thing about the book, actually, on a serious level, on a
Yeah.
non-comedy level, is that he manages to take the protagonist's flaw and central trauma and make that like exact thing into the cosmic horror. Like it's a clever thing to do with this genre, I think.
Yeah. So then we skip ahead a little bit.
Okay.
Sorry.
So later on, our heroes manage to explode the evil base on the other world with some explosive doggy treat diarrhea, and they escape. But David is forced to finally deal with the body in his shed. I reached the little building. John didn't follow, but apparently already knew what I would find. I threw aside the tarp wrapped around the corpse's feet and began tearing at frozen laces on a pair of black leather hiking boots, just like mine. Even a scuff along the toe, like mine. The body snatchers were insane about their detail. They had to be. I said, I came home and I found this thing in my yard, this thing that looked just like me, and I ran in and got the gun and I popped him. He probably would have tried to kill me if I stopped. I had pulled I had pulled off the shoe and peeled off the frozen sock, but saw absolutely no mark on the dead foot. I chuckled out loud for some reason. I dropped the foot and grabbed for the other one, started to pull apart the laces, lost my grip in my numbing fingers, and threw the foot aside, realizing that I was fooling myself. I stood there, laughing softly, steam puffing into the darkness, then finally did what I should have done first. I went and I sat on the step Amy had vacated. As I passed, John pulled Amy back behind him, backing off from me, giving me lots of space. I started to take off my right shoe, thought, then went for the left instead. I yanked off the boot and the sock and looked at my big toe. Then I started laughing, laughing so hard I could barely breathe. John looked at me with no expression because he already knew, looked like he had known for some time. Amy hung back behind him, looking nervously between us. I brought up the foot and rubbed at the pie symbol on my toe, as if I could make it come off. I knew, of course, that it never, ever would. So he's realized that he is, of course, a monster clone, and he actually killed the original David Wong, and that it's been him in the shed this whole time.
Yeah, and so all the moments of change, all the moments of growth, the telling of the story, the revealing of his truth was done by a David Wong that is not David Wong.
Yep.
Or is he? And that's what the story at the beginning of the book was priming us for. Is this David? He has all David's memories. He's a better version of David because he's grown, he's changed. And then you get into this idea of death and rebirth, right? That the old David Wong, the David Wong who hated himself, the David Wong who couldn't move past things and like was angry and mean, and that David Wong has died and something else is here now, and that the rebirthed one is the one capable of change, capable of growing up, capable of moving on. And that's interesting. I don't even know if that's necessarily true. Like that's just like whenever you have two versions of a person, like the idea of death and rebirth becomes a symbol that you think you have to explore if you're analyzing the story. But I don't know. I find all that very fascinating.
Yeah, I like it a lot. I like to think about it. I think the way the story takes it, I get the sense that all of the clones are pretty much exactly the person that they were a clone of until the evil force kind of needs to use them for its purposes,
Right.
and then it just kind of like overwrites them with evil. But they can't do that to David because of he's special in some way. I forget exactly what the justification is there. Or actually, they kind of do, right? Because that's when he's losing time, right?
Yeah, I mean, and that's something we hinted at earlier in the story too, is that right after the events of Vegas, he loses time.
Mm-hmm.
He loses months at a time, and he's been told this has happened before. But we don't think he's the David. The original David is the one that's killed until that events of the chapter where he realized the bullet in his gun was missing and that stuff. So I don't know. I don't know how to read that. I think that's very interesting. The fact that he's losing time earlier. I don't know what that's necessarily saying, but
Yeah.
yeah, I like this idea of he's now, maybe it's almost a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? Like he saw himself as a monster. He saw himself as a thing that at any minute could turn into the violent person he always thought he was. And now he is literally that. He is literally like, at any moment they could take him over and transform him into a monster, or take him over and use him to do terrible, horrible things. And that's what he always thought was true.
Mm-hmm.
And so he's made that self-fulfilling, but even still, even with that, his friends still want to be with him. Like, I love this idea. John looked at me with no expression because he already knew, looked like he had known for some time. How long had John known? He knows his friend enough to know he's behaving slightly differently, to maybe notice the change in him that the old Dave might not have been capable of. And as long as he's not a direct threat to him, John has got his back. And I love that.
Yeah, right. The fact that John considers him to be still worth protecting, and so does Amy. And in fact, this is the David that they've been hanging out with for quite a while. So
yeah, I love the realization, like when John is talking to Amy, and I think John probably is more likely to want to kill this version of Dave than Amy is, because they're having a little bit of an argument, and we hear this John say something to the effect of, "You've never actually even met the real David." That, like, this is the only, like, I think they met like once briefly, but every interaction that Amy has had with Dave in the second half of this book has been this clone version of Dave. So this, to her, this is Dave.
right.
It is.
Yeah. Yep.
All right, and now we are back with the story. He has completed a story, and he's trying to figure out why Arnie, the journalist, is still here. But why was he still here? Hell, why had he come in the first place? No matter what he said, I still got this vibe from him that he wanted to believe me and that I was letting him down. He had been listening patiently to my story for 6 hours straight. I wouldn't have done that if the roles were reversed. I would have politely said, "Well, I think I got all I need," and then sprinted off in the other direction, laughing maniacally. But Arnie looked like he had come here expecting answers and would now leave empty-handed. I had seen that look before, on the faces of tourists visiting the Texas Book Depository in Dallas, where Lee Harvey Oswald took shots at JFK. I took the tour and met some conspiracy buffs, all of us standing at the gunman's window and looking down to the spot where the motorcade passed. It's right there below the window, an easy shot at a slow-moving car. No mystery, just a kid and a rifle and a tragedy. They came looking for dark and terrible revelations, and instead found out something even more dark and terrible, that their lives were trite and boring. So I think this is the book.
Yeah.
And I think this is like the story that sometimes, especially when bad things are happening to us, when we've been pushed to the outside, he says it in that very part that the kids ostracized and pushed outside into the cold look for the conspiracy theories. They want the terrible things in life to not be mundane, because at least that would make sense. But the dark and terrible truth of the world is that there is no cosmic horror, that it is just us. It is just Death Planet, or whatever
Yeah.
shit load called it.
Yeah. Right.
That's just what it is, and you got to find a way to live on it, because that's all there is. Find other people. Find other people that feel the way you do. Find other people that have gone through the things that you have done. Find other people that see life the way you see it, and stick with those people, because that's all you got.
Yeah, I haven't read that many Lovecraft stories, but like, even though this is a comedy, this definitely hit me on the level of like feeling the existential kind of nihilistic horror of the premise more than any of Lovecraft's stories did.
Well, it's
any of the
interesting
ones I read
because
anyway.
It does it in kind of the opposite way, right? Lovecraft says the bad in the world is this cosmic, unknowable force that we can't even understand or comprehend. It's out of our comprehension. And this says, no, It's just us.
Yeah.
That's just like
Yeah.
which is worse.
Yeah, and it's in, and not just us, but it's in you. It's in
Yep.
you actually, which
Every
is,
single one of you is capable of doing that.
yeah, yeah. And I also think it's funny that he's he is the kind of person who goes on a tour of the the Texas Book Depository.
Yeah,
Um,
like he distances himself from
yeah,
it, right?
right,
Like he
right.
says, "I met with conspiracy theorists,
Yeah,
conspiracy buffs,"
yeah,
but the implication here is he was just as disappointed
right.
by this truth that like he puts it because he's Dave. He puts this disappointment on the people he was around,
Yeah,
those conspiracy buffs, but
nope.
he's one of them.
Yeah, right.
And he kind of almost betrays that in this sign. Like, I took the tour and met some conspiracy buffs, all of us standing like, so he introduces them and immediately makes them an us to kind of in my mind imply that he's one of them.
Right. Now, certainly these are his thoughts that he's
Yeah. Yeah.
imputing on them. Yeah. All right.
Last slide.
Whoop slide. So Arnie kind of believes Dave now and wants him to go public to do something. The spirits have threatened Amy, and he doesn't want to do anything because of her, though. It's called being willing to sacrifice everyone around me for the cause. And why not? All the great men do it. The pyramids were built with tens of thousands of nobodies who were worked to death so that the big thing could be achieved. That's the name of the game. That's how you defeat the bad guys. Just be willing to spend your friends like pennies, that's all. You asked me earlier if I was a sociopath. Well, you'd better hope I am, because the world was built by sociopaths, men willing to send 1 million innocent boys into battle to be chopped to screaming giblets. Also, a banner can be raised over another piece of land with houses and markets and roads soon after. I talked faster and faster. I bit back my next sentence, made myself calm down, got to focus. Freaking ADD. I said, that psychologist back in school, she gave me the PCLR. That's a test where they rate you from 0 to 40 based on personality traits of sociopaths. Glibness, inflated ego, violence, juvenile delinquency, all that serial killer shit. Anything above a score of 30 gets you a diagnosis of sociopathy. I got a 29, and the irony is that I had to steal the file from the cabinet to find out that score. Do you think that's worth the extra point? He shook his head slowly. I'm not following you. Which would prove I'm a monster, Arnie? Sacrificing the people I love for the fight, or walking away from the fight to save the people I love?
So this is why I think deciding whether or not this story has a happy ending is so tough for me, Matt, because you have this moment where he's I think it's a changed person to say that, like, I love the people, I care about the people I surround myself with, which is a change from him. Like, it's not something it's not the way he always was. He was not, he was much more self-centered, and now he seems much more concerned with the people he actually fundamentally cares about. But after this moment, Arnie talks him into going to trying to spread the story and doing good. And then it's revealed that Arnie's dead and
Yep.
Arnie's not here, and they got to him already, and it's hopeless. And the book ends with them discovering a portal to another world and another adventure of people that they need to save, and them and then piecing out and
Yeah.
being like, nope, fuck that. We're
Yep.
not doing that.
They just play basketball.
Yeah.
It's kind of awesome.
But then another group comes along
Yeah.
and goes into the portal, and I mean, it feels like a weird, like, kind of selfish thing to say, but it's like maybe part of the message is like, protect the people you care about. You don't have to solve the whole universe's problems.
Yeah, I kind of like the idea that he actually learns to love himself. He doesn't say it this way, but he no longer hates himself at the end.
Yeah.
Because he actually thinks that he's like worthy of taking care of the people he loves and being a part of their lives. And that's a huge positive change for him. That's a good thing that was introduced into the world over the course of the story. And
Yeah.
I think that it is, the book, I think, is saying, yeah, it would be bad for him to take this newfound goodness and just go, sacrifice it basically, for questionable gain, really, because who knows how these things work.
Yeah. Just because an interdimensional portal appears on your basketball court does not mean that you have to be the one to step through it.
Yeah. There's also the idea of like, hey, we already saved it. We already did
Yeah,
we did this
we did
once.
our thing.
Yeah.
Yes, it's someone else's turn.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's time for the stereotypical group of youngsters to do it.
Yeah. A very stereotypical group of young. I loved that. It's
Yeah.
like looks like two of them fell in love.
Yeah.
It
Right. Yeah.
was great. All right, so before we wrap up for the day, I want to talk about the movie a little bit. If you look on the screen, Matt, you will see what the meat monster looked like in the movie.
I love it.
So yeah, the movie, the story of this is a little weird because like the book was published as a straight to paperback by a kind of small publishing company. It didn't sell like a whole lot. And then the director of Phantasm read the book and said, I want to make this into a movie. And it was the movie that kind of bolstered the book sales to a different level. And the movie cuts out a lot, Matt. So the movie cuts out the fact that he's a clone. The movie, I think, gets rid of Jennifer Lopez as a character. The movie streamlines a lot of the shagginess, but I think it also loses some of what makes it good. It leans much heavier into the corny Evil Dead campiness of things, and it has much less of like the actual like moments of pathos for your main character. It is like as much as this book felt like just the silliness until you really dive into it. The movie is just the silliness, like to the point where the movie opens with the story about the axe, just like the book does. But I think the significance of the story of the axe is him analyzing what it means to be the clone of a person that's died, and that part's not in the movie. So the axe is just a funny story that has no connection to anything in the
Yeah.
story.
So it kind of ripped out all of the themes that we were talking about today.
Absolutely, 100%.
Yeah.
Like Korrok still says all the same things, but they took away the toddler voice.
Okay.
So it doesn't and nothing to do with the locker room stuff is in the movie. So there's like no like it very much like it goes through the motions without any of the underlying meaning behind it. And I still think it's like an entertaining, silly movie, but it's definitely like turn your brain off. Like this book is I think almost turn your brain off entertainment. The movie is like times a million.
Yeah. That's what's interesting is I as much as I liked all of the heavy stuff in the book and I like talking about it and thinking about it, I think the book was still really fun with, even if that hadn't been in there, I think
Yeah.
I still would have enjoyed it.
I think
Yeah.
it's very tough to talk in a book club podcast about. I mean, it would just be us saying, "Yeah, that was fun. I like that. That was
Yeah.
fun." But yeah, I mean, I think it's a quick, easy read. It's not going to win any literature awards, and it probably shouldn't. But that doesn't mean it's a bad book.
Yeah. It's yet again, this is one of those books. I think maybe you feel the same where after I read it, I was like, I don't know if I'm going to have a lot to say about that. But then in the process of ruminating on it, we find that we do.
Yeah, I mean, I think I said this in the Discord chat earlier today that this is, I think, the most fun part about doing this to me is that even when I look at a book that I read in a day that I really didn't think had very much in it, and I didn't particularly love, like I gave this a 3 out of 5 on Goodreads. This is not one of my top books I've read this year by far. I think it's fine. It's fine. But even a book that's just cheesy, immature, stupid entertainment has stuff in there that you can dive into.
Yeah.
There's meaning there. And even if some of this meaning is not meaning that was intended by the author, I think it's still there.
Yeah. Well, and also I'll say like I read for many reasons. Most people, I think, read for many different reasons. One of the reasons I read is to understand, like what makes a good story. Just partly just for the sake of understanding it, partly for the sake of learning techniques to use in my own writing. And like the fact that I just tore through this book and was like grinning for half of it tells me, hey, he succeeded in being entertaining. That's worth understanding. It's worth understanding how he did that. And I can completely agree with you that it doesn't deserve any prizes, and maybe I wouldn't even recommend it to most people. Like I might recommend it to people who are kind of in my set, if you know what I mean. But I wouldn't like generally recommend it. But still, like just the fact that I'm like, wow, I was very entertained. I want to understand how he did that, and it's worth thinking about.
Yeah, no, I think you're absolutely right, and I think that's why I really don't like the the lines we draw between books. I kind of just did it myself, but the lines we draw between literature and genre fiction. I mean, some books are better than others. Some stories are better than others. Some stories are classier than others. But something can be learned from even the most ridiculous dick joke filled story.
Yep.
So, does anyone have any questions for us? Anything else that you felt like we should have talked about that we didn't? I know, Sergey, you were not a fan of this book, and I think you did a pretty good job of arguing why. I'm sorry. Like, I wish you had liked it. Sometimes books just aren't for you, and that's fine. I think my sister is right there with you. My sister did not like this book at all, and I got very many angry text messages from my sister about why we're reading this. Why I don't care about these characters. Do I have to read this? But well, as the questions are coming in, why don't we go ahead and cover what we're doing next month?
That sounds good to me.
All right, so next month we are doing Hyperion by Dan Simmons. This, Matt, was a book that did so well the first time we ran it for the poll that 9 months ago I bought the book because I thought it was going to win, and then at the last minute another book swooped in and took its place. I forget which book it was, but I've had this book sitting on my shelf for almost a year, and I finally get to read it, so I'm pretty excited.
Yeah, me too. This is one of those books where I know a ton about it by osmosis because it's very popular.
Yeah.
But I have never read it.
I have never read it either. I'm very, very excited about
Looking
that.
forward to it, yeah.
Yeah. And the book club will be on Friday, September 28th, which is the day after my birthday. And I'll be coming back from Fantastic Fest, so
awesome.
It's gonna be a rough Friday evening for me.
Very intense.
Yeah, it's gonna be good though. So yeah, I mean, if you have any questions, comments, complaints, anything you want to talk about that you didn't feel like we covered about John Dies at the End, anything you want to talk about, make sure we include in our talk for Hyperion coming up next month. Reach out to us at doofmedia@gmail.com or on Twitter @doofmedia. And all right, so we got some questions coming in.
Yeah.
Oh, Sergey says this reminded him of Frankenstein. There can be some fun had in discussing it, but reading it was a miserable experience. Yeah, I mean, like I think Frankenstein is a brilliant book, but yeah, it's a tough read. Have you ever read Dracula, Matt?
No.
Dracula is boring.
Mm-hmm.
Like nothing happens. It's so slow.
Yeah. I mean, so like there are a few people involved in our various Doof shows,
mm-hmm.
and some of us enjoy everything. Literally everything. And some of us hate almost everything.
I wonder who these people are.
There are two ends of the spectrum. I'm not naming any names, but there are two particular people I'm holding in my mind right now. And like, that's fine. Like I many years ago stopped arguing like you should try to like more things, or conversely, you should be a little bit more discerning with your taste, because like what? Like no, like you enjoy what you enjoy. And I think it's worthwhile to understand why you like certain things and why you don't like certain things. And
yeah.
I guess I'm someone who's more on the end of the spectrum of like, I'm going to find something to like about this. I do hate some things. That's
yeah, I definitely do too.
Yeah.
I think it's interesting. I think that's a really good point, because I used to be very worried that I liked too many things, right? I was like, I like too many things. It means I'm not being critical enough. Like there's like the idea of a guilty pleasure, or the idea of a person that like a critic that is just too kind to movies. I kind of fundamentally reject all that now. I think you like what you like and you don't like what you like. And I think if you're curious as to why, that's when you can start to explore stories and say, okay, I did not like this thing. Why didn't I like it?
Mm-hmm.
I did like this thing. Why did I like it? And that's what you and I really like to do. But yeah, I mean, I don't like. I think there's a lot of people out there, and I'm not. We're using Sergey's comment as a jumping off point. I don't think we're attacking them at all. That is not the intent. But
yeah.
I just think there are a lot of people out there that are very self-conscious about the things that they do and do not like, and don't. Earth, planet, like what you like.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Precisely. Michael asks, why do you think this book has the cult appeal that it does? I mean, That's a really interesting question.
People love weird, funny shit. Especially horror fans love really weird, cheesy, campy, funny shit. And this this book slots into that pretty well, I think.
Yeah, I think that's a good answer.
Yeah, sorry, Sergey. I didn't mean to say that you dislike everything. I don't think that's what that was. I think we used your comment as a jumping off point. We are not trying to say that uh, that. I mean, you don't like this book. That's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. Did you have an answer to Michael? Sorry, I
Not really.
jumped
No,
at you.
I like your answer because I can't really get any more. Like I'm trying to go all meta and think like, well, why do certain things have a cult appeal? Because cult appeal basically just means it appeals to a subset of people rather than having a
Right.
mass appeal.
Right.
And I mean, I can see why this doesn't have a mass appeal because it's
It's
weird
yeah.
and and kind of off-putting in some ways that are intentional that we've discussed, in some ways that are unintentional and like it just could have been done better. But I think sometimes there's a certain subset of people who are just down for weird horror shit, like you
Yeah.
said, and it's like, yeah, this feeds that audience. So
Yeah. Genre weird genre fans are some of the most passionate type of fans I've seen. They not only do they like stuff, when they like it, they really get into it. And the film festival I'm going to be in at the end of next month is a genre film festival. It'll be weird shit like this. I'm going to watch 30 movies of weird, disturbing shit for a week. And it's fun. I think this premiered at Sundance, but this is a movie that would have played gangbusters
mhm.
in that film festival, and it's because people like stories like this. I'm sure everyone there has read this book just because that's the type of stuff people like. But yeah,
Yeah,
it's the same reason why people love Sam Raimi, because he's cheesy and campy and hilarious and weird as shit.
yeah,
All right, I think that's it for us this month.
yeah.
Thank you everyone for hanging out live with us. For those listening on the podcast, consider hanging out with us live next month. I think Sergey and Michael and Hayden and um, I'm scrolling and Ben. I think and everyone else that is there
Kyrgyzstan,
is
Sergey.
here.
Yeah,
Yeah, is here, but just a little more shy. Would agree that hanging out and doing this thing live is a lot more fun. So I know you guys like listening to the audiobook, but maybe come hang out.
yeah.
I'm talking to my sister. My sister always listens to these. She never hangs out live.
Oh,
Cindy.
yeah.
Cindy.
Come on, say something.
Yeah.
You've been on the show before.
You have.
Yeah. If you like what we do here at Doof Media and want to see more of it, head on over to our Patreon, patreon.com/Doof Media, and consider donating $1 a month or whatever else you can afford. You get access to our private Discord server, as well as the ability to vote for which books we cover and tons of other cool benefits. Check it out.
That's right. Again, if you have any questions or comments or anything for us, you can always reach out to us on Twitter at doofmedia or via email at doofmedia@gmail.com. Remember, if you have anything you want us to pay attention to when we're reading and preparing for the Hyperion discussion, you can send us an email and we will make sure we include that in our discussion next month. But that's all we got. We will see you all next month. I was going to try to think of a funny John dies at the end thing to say to sign off, but I forgot them.
Some
Penis doorknob.
some clone of us will see you next month.
Penis doorknob.
Yes. That was
fun. I enjoyed that.
Yeah.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah. Thanks for hanging out. Thanks for your comments and and feedback.
I hope, Sergey, we didn't make you feel like we were
Arguing. Yeah. I mean, it's interesting because I actually care a lot about like whether someone likes something or not actually matters, but it's not something we actually talk about very much. Like I tend to focus more on like, does something accomplish what it's trying to accomplish for me, and if so, how does it? And it's really interesting for me to be faced with like, oh, it doesn't work for you, and I mean that's like useful information because something may work for some people and not others, and that's a good thing to know when you're trying to analyze the craft of storytelling.
I think it makes for a better discussion too. I
Yeah.
mean, I think this was a good discussion, and part of it was a good discussion is because we were we had people coming from both sides of it. Sergey didn't like it as much as we did, and I think sometimes you and me, because we like so many of the same things, that we're in agreement too much. And I really want to get. I hope one day we have a book where like you just fucking hate and I love, or vice versa, and we get to
That'd be
Thunderdome it.
that'd be good. Yeah.
I think we just our taste in the stuff we like is very similar. So,
Yeah.
which I mean, that's why we're friends, and that's why we do this.
Yeah.
But
Can
we can always get Michael in here.
yeah. There's one book that I want to suggest just because it's like one that I think you might actually like that I already know that I hate, but
Oh,
anyway.
we do have an us pick'em coming up. So.
Yeah. But see, I don't want to have to read this book again. So, oh yeah, I'm gonna stop the recording.
Yeah. When do you want to do the Scott Teaches Matt audition session? Oh,
Mm.
do we want to shut
Well.
down the screen? I have businessy stuff to talk to you about.
Okay.
So I guess we should shut down the stream.
Yes.
Yeah, guys. So thanks again for hanging out. It was fun as always. And I think there's we started this because I think there's a lot of people out there who want to talk about books and do a book club, but there are local book clubs in my area, but I just feel weird going to like a bookstore and talking to a bunch of strangers I don't know in person because I'm socially awkward. So I just want to do it online. So if you have any friends or anything like that that you think would have fun with this too, invite them. Share this with people.
Absolutely.
I love the participation. You guys were great today, and we always want that level of participation. We really like it. So
Yeah.
thanks, guys. We will see you later. I'm going to turn it off because every time we do this, I turn it off the wrong way, and then it stays on for 4 hours.
Sounds good.
So it's not off yet. So don't say anything you'll regret.
Okay. Keeping my mouth shut.
Now it's just awkward silence as I stop streaming. Boom.